Hello and welcome to Cellophane Designs. Once again today I'm down at the gallery. I'm here today and tomorrow this week, so I thought I'd bring my video camera down and do my intro filming down here today. So for this week's video I've created these two resin dishes. The inspiration comes from glass sculptures and vases. Quite often I'll refer to glass that I've seen on Pinterest and things for my inspiration, because I just like glass and I like how light shines through it and things like that. So this is what I try to emulate with the resin. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I aim to do. So for these two, I poured them onto cellophane and glad wrap, sorry. I poured them onto like cling film, and which is very, very thin, because I didn't want it to be as rigid as the other pieces that I've made using the cello bags or the baking paper or even the plastic bags. So this is a really thin, and I got really nice results. So I got a nice smooth surface here, which, because I poured it a little bit thicker, and I'll explain in the video how I managed to get a nice smooth surface there. But on the inside you can see there's some ridges from the cellophane. I keep saying cellophane, from the glad wrap or cling film or whatever you call it. So, and then this one, because I'd put this one inside, you can see there are some ridges on there, but if I hadn't have made them together, because they will actually sit, don't want to go there, will actually sit inside each other, but I decided I like them better separate. The only thing I would change with these is I used too much white. So as you can see in the center there, the white has crept through and we've lost a lot of the transparency through there. So that's one thing that I'll adjust in the next piece. But other than that, I'm really pleased with how these turned out. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So for this piece I'm using two upside down serving trays. The reason for this is there's a small lip around the bottom edge that works quite well to pour the resin without it being too thin, but without it being too thick either. So it's actually quite a good thing to use for the pouring. And as you can see, I'm just coating it with cling film to just make sure that I can remove it easily when transferring it to the vase. Now I started off with India ink for the colours, for the transparency, because I think India ink works best when you're working with colours for transparency, and I find it to be quite effective. You don't need a lot of India ink, it's just a few drops is more than adequate. As always, zapping the bubbles with a heat gun. Now just be careful not to overdo with the heat gun, because you don't want to melt the cling film because it's quite thin. So I will go over this quite a few times with just light bursts of the heat gun, just to make sure the bubbles are burst. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I used a bit too much white around the edge. Next time when I do this, I won't do the white at this stage. I will just add the stones and then add some white later on. This is because I want to do it in a controlled manner. I do like, however, how the white paste, now that I'm using Lorez White Angel pigment paste. Now this works, this creates absolutely fabulous lacing with India ink because of the different densities. So for this I didn't need any mineral turpentine for the lacing, because the two together with the different densities work really, really well. But like I say, next time I won't use this method, so I'll be trying something else, but I do still want some lacing to happen, so there will be some white, but just not the same amount. Now unfortunately I'd forgotten to switch on the video when mixing the clear acrylic gems with some white and a little touch of the turquoise resin, but you get the idea here. I'm just sticking it into a silicone baking tray and just mixed the stones with some white so that it would bind them together rather than just pouring the stones, because the stones would then lie flat. This gives a nice raised edge around the outside. Like I mentioned before, I won't do the white first on the blue. I'll wait until I've added it to the stones and then let the white creep into the blue, and then I'll just add a small amount of white to give a bit of the lacing in the cells. So just using a spoon, I'm just applying this around the edge. I find a spoon to be quite easy to use because you get more control over placement, but if you've just got a stick or whatever to do, that would work just as well. And I'm just doing the same with both pieces, just going to go around and add the stones to the edge. Now I'm also adding some of the clear acrylic diamonds around the outside as well. This is to give the impression of water droplets around the edge, and I'm also going to let it run into the transparency of the blue. Again, this is to give the impression of bubbles in the water, and it does create a nice sparkle effect around the outside, especially as the white does dull down the acrylic diamonds. As you can see, this process that I'm doing is actually quite effective. This looks nice just even as a standalone piece, and it's something that I will maybe consider doing in the future and not just doing this for bending, because I do like the extra depth of this. Okay, so this has been curing for 2 to 3 hours. The times that it takes to get to the stage depends on the time of year, type of resin you're using, etc, etc. But one of the things that I always use to test it is to have a stick at the side that I've used to mix the resin, and I will use this to test the resin. And what you're looking for at this stage is for the resin to no longer be sticky. However, it will still leave fingerprints if you were to touch it. So obviously you don't want to touch it, so that's why we do use a stick. But that's when you know it's the right time to move the resin, because you're going to get very minimal running using this method. And what I'm doing here now is I'm just adding a little bit of heat to help with the bending process, especially as this is a bit thicker than the usual pour, because we've done it on the tray. It's not continued to expand out, so you do have a thicker pour. And then I've just put a bit more of the cling film on the top to help with if I need to reposition the piece, it's then not stuck to the resin underneath. So once you're happy with the design layout, it's now time to leave it to cure overnight before removing the plastic. So it's the next day and it's been left overnight. It's now time to remove all the cling film and remove the vase from the centre. Now, as this is a lot thicker than a normal pour onto plastic, it does need a little bit of help in removing, so we're just applying a little bit of heat. Not too much, because we don't want to burn the cling film, but just enough to help expand the outside so that we can remove the vase. And as you can see, with a little bit of heat, it actually removes quite easily. And so now it's time to remove the plastic. Now, the original plan was to do a double layer piece, as I've done with some of the others, but because we poured it onto the serving tray, it's made the resin a bit thicker, so you don't actually need to do a double layer. So I've decided to keep these as individual pieces because they look good enough by themselves that they don't need to be doubled up, because they're thick enough and got enough interest to be alright by themselves. As you can see, I did try and put them back together, but then decided they looked better by themselves. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's pre-ordered the ebook, The Essential Beginner's Guide to Resin Art Techniques. Every sale from this book helps go towards funding these videos, so for that I'm eternally grateful, so thank you for that. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to see more of these videos, please go to my channel and check out some of my other resin freeform sculptures. So until next time, thank you, goodbye now.